Hey friends, welcome back to the Paradox Port channel. So I've been in the productivity and self-improvement space for a while, both as a professional conducting research at one of the world's largest corporations, and just as a constantly curious individual. Now, along this journey, I've noticed a couple of pitfalls that I feel most productivity approaches fail to address. Now, I won't go so far as to call much of the productivity culture toxic. It does work for some, but I found that most of the advice you find on social media tends to be a little bit misleading, shallow, incomplete, or just lacking in context, right? So in this video, I will walk you through some core ideas that I believe productivity advice often misses and what we can do about it. So the first one is the challenge of focus. When we're embarking on the path of productivity, we often try to bite off more than we can chew. I've been guilty of this countless times. I feel like it's time to change my life, and then I quickly resolve to, start exercising more, meditating, eating healthy, journaling, spending more time with friends, starting a side hustle, whatever it might be, right? But then this resolve, kind of creates a frantic week of excitement that is then quickly followed by complete disillusion and failure. So I don't know if you can relate to that, if that's ever happened to you, but it definitely happens to me a fair amount. But here's the thing. A lot of research shows that willpower is a limited resource. And in the beginning, forming new habits does take a significant amount of willpower. So if we seek change in too many areas of our life simultaneously, we quickly deplete our willpower and our goals are left floundering, right? So when setting out to change our lives, we should try to sort of focus on one area at a time. And it should be the area that we feel the most intrinsically called to change. Something that we really deeply care about and goes beyond the many shoulds that society throws our way. So it's also important to remember that while you're changing, it might not really feel like anything is happening because we're just sort of focused on one potentially small thing. But we need to trust that we are indeed changing. And then that for each positive life habit we build, the next one will be incrementally easier to stack upon that, right? Change is slow, usually happens in one area, and requires trust. The next thing I want to talk about is the challenge of duality. So in my book, Just Roll With It, I talk about 10 different techniques for behavior change. And they include concepts like goal setting, implementation intentions, the habit loop, and so on. Now, early in writing this book and sort of testing my ideas on myself, I noticed something interesting. Each approach to behavior change has a light and a dark side. They are inherent dualities. So while they can be incredibly empowering and get you down the right path, sort of, each has a unique failure point or ways to lead you astray. So for example, the concept of implementation intentions helps you start pursuing a behavior by creating an obvious cue for initiating it. So you might make an intention that says something like, when I get home from work, I will put on my running shoes. And then doing so can really help you create that sort of automaticity in habits by creating consistent cues and timings for goal pursuit, right? However, what happens if you have a few weeks in a row where you have many events after work and you can no longer adhere to your intended sequence? The fact that you are relying on specific cues to build behaviors can actually create inflexibility and lead you to drop the behavior if those cues are no longer present. So in that sense, there's a dark side of implementation intentions, inflexibility, right? So similarly, the book talks a lot about mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is amazing and can really help you regulate your emotions or detach from unwanted thought patterns and just in general move through life in an easier, more present way. But in my experience, there's kind of a fine line between becoming more aware of your emotions and thoughts and suppressing them, right? It's up to you to sort of determine where that balance lies and to kind of be aware enough of your own tendencies. Because the goal of mindfulness is not to become an imperturbable, emotionless rock, but rather a more aware, sensitive, intentional, alive human. But those two states can be a little bit hard to distinguish as you begin to move towards mindfulness. So the dark side of mindfulness can be suppression if you're not careful, okay? Now, behavior change in general, the literature has powerful ideas that are totally worth trying. But you should also always pay attention to how they work for you and be open to adapting them as life happens. So set goals and work to achieve them, but realize that no one solution will get you where you want to go, and possibly over-reliance on one technique can actually lead you astray. And more importantly, you should always try to seek balance, right? Follow a given technique when it makes sense, and then be kind and accepting when it doesn't, okay? The next thing I want to quickly touch on is the challenge of medium. Now, most of how we relate to productivity these days is technologically mediated. We set to-do reminders, we send emails, and we use various apps that sort of promise to help us keep track of our increasingly hectic lives, right? However, I see a core issue with using our phones and computers as the primary facilitators of behavior change. Every time we open our phones, we face a portal of possibility. There's so much demanding our attention. With the capturing influence of social media algorithms and news headlines only one click away. How many times have you opened your phone to just write something down real quick, only to see a notification pop up and then get sucked down another path of activity? If you're like me, it happens all the time. So using your phone as a medium for behavior change may work for some, but for many, it just provides too many additional distractions and temptations to be a real value add. So I tend to recommend tracking behaviors, progress, and thoughts in more of a physical product, something where the only distraction is your own mind and its unfolding desires and patterns. The final thing I want to quickly touch on is the challenge of resilience. So the real work happens not when you're writing down a list of everything you're going to work on, or even once you start tracking your goals and working towards achieving them. The real work happens when you lose that initial momentum, when you hit roadblocks or inevitably fall behind, and maybe even cease your pursuit altogether, right? There's a lot of research about grit and resilience, of sticking with something when the going gets tough. But there isn't a ton of research on what happens when we lose that grit or aren't feeling particularly resilient. Now, to better understand this idea and kind of where the idea of resilience breaks down, let's use a metaphor. Surfing in this case. So, you catch a wave of motivation and you're really enjoying riding the building swell, the wave. But eventually, it ends, it crashes, right? But that isn't the end of your surfing. You just paddle back out and you put yourself in a position to catch another wave. So in this sense, motivation is kind of both a passive and active thing. It will naturally ebb and flow and crash just like the sea. But then it's up to you to sort of put yourself in a position to ride the wave of motivation when it does arise again. What does that look like? Well, it means you just keep learning, keep doing activities that you intrinsically enjoy, getting out into the world and meeting interesting people, such that when you feel like you're ready to begin the ride again, you're aware, you're engaged, you're alive, you're joyful enough to really ride it. And then to not worry too much when you inevitably fall off a particular wave. Because resilience happens over time. It's just about getting back on and trusting that another wave will arrive. And over time, you will make it to the shore. And that's it for now. If any of these ideas strike a chord in you, I highly recommend you check out my latest book. Just Roll With It sort of tries to address all of the above challenges, and it teaches you about behavior change strategies and helps you find a balanced approach to growth. And it helps you pick one area of your life to focus on changing for a couple month period, ensuring that you don't really bite off too much at once and that you have enough willpower to see it through. It's a book, so you'll experience tracking and building habits in a less distracting environment. And finally, it's a gentle approach to behavior change that will support you if you're riding a wave of motivation and will welcome you back when you inevitably fall off. That's it for now. Thank you so much. Till next time.